Story 5. The Break Room Nurse in the Glass. The break room was supposed to be safe. It wasn't much to look at, just two battered couches shoved against the wall, a TV mounted high in the corner, and a little table with a coffee maker that never worked quite right. Nurses on night shifts used it to eat, to vent, and, when they were desperate, to catch a few minutes of sleep. It was one of the few spaces where you could almost forget you were in a hospital. Almost. Until the story of the woman in the glass. It was a fellow nurse who told me, late one night, when we were both bone-tired and trying to keep ourselves awake between rounds. She'd been dozing on one of the couches, blanket pulled up to her chin, when something jolted her awake. A light, she thought. Someone had gone into the adjoining locker room. The door between the two rooms had a little square of glass in it, just big enough to see through, and sure enough, there was light spilling through. At first, she thought nothing of it. Nurses came and went all night, using the lockers, washing their faces, grabbing their things. But then she glanced up and froze. There was a woman standing in the doorway. Not in the doorway itself, but on the other side, in the locker room, visible only through that tiny square of glass. She was staring straight ahead. Not at the nurse, not at anything in particular, just straight ahead. Her face expressionless. She wasn't really looking at me. My coworker whispered, her voice trembling even though she was telling me this days later. It was like she wasn't looking at anything at all. In brings her. I asked her what she looked like, and the description made my skin crawl. Old-fashioned. Her hair was styled in tight curls, the kind of style you'd see in pictures from the 70s. She wore blue pinstripe scrubs, nothing like the modern ones we wore, and on her head was a nurse's cap. Nobody wore caps anymore. Not for decades. You know those old scrubs they've got framed in the lobby, the ones on display? She asked me. It was just like that. She thought at first it might be the IV nurse. Sometimes they'd come in during the night shift, using the bathroom or grabbing supplies. So she'd called out, irritated. "Hey, turn that light off, will ya? I'm trying to sleep in here." But the woman didn't respond, didn't even blink, just kept staring straight ahead, her face pale and blank behind the little square of glass. Eventually, my coworker gave up and pulled a pillow over her head. She drifted back to sleep. But when she woke up later, the light was still on, and when she asked around, no one had been in the locker room that night. The IV nurse swore she hadn't gone in there. And besides, she wasn't dressed like that. That was when the older staff confirmed what many of them already knew. The ghost in the glass was real. She'd been a nurse who worked at Street Luke's decades ago. The story went that she'd finished a long night shift, exhausted, and on her drive home, she fell asleep at the wheel. The accident killed her instantly. And now, her spirit still wandered the halls she had once worked. I shivered when I heard this, not just because of the story, but because of the timing. Only the night before, one of my patients had told me that someone had been looking in on them during the night, peeking through the doorway, sometimes standing there for long minutes without moving. She had old scrubs, the patient had whispered nervously, like from a long time ago. And her hair was funny, old-fashioned, not like yours. At the time, I had chalked it up to medication. Post-surgical patients often hallucinate. Painkillers blur the line between dreams and reality. But now, hearing my coworker's story, the pieces fit together too neatly. And the worst part? I saw her myself. It was maybe a week later. I was walking the corridor toward the break room, exhausted from a long round of charting. The hall was dim, the overhead lights buzzing faintly. When I reached the break room door, I glanced at the little square of glass, and there she was. The woman, in pinstripe scrubs. Her pale face hovered just behind the glass, staring straight ahead. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips didn't move. She was simply there. My legs froze. My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Her eyes, though blank, felt like they were boring into me, pinning me to the spot. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, my heart pounding in my ears. It might have been seconds. It felt like hours. And then, as suddenly as she appeared, she was gone. The light in the locker room flickered and went out, leaving only my pale reflection in the glass. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest, gasping for breath. The next morning, I told myself it had been exhaustion, stress, hallucination, anything but what it seemed. But when I went to check on my patient in room 14 later that night, she whispered to me, trembling. She came back, the one with the funny hair. She stood in my doorway for a long time. I tried to call out, but she wouldn't leave. I didn't have the heart to tell her I'd seen the same thing, because the truth was, I didn't want to believe it myself.
Story 6. The Patient in Room 14. Room 14. Even saying it out loud makes my skin prickle. Every floor has a room like that, the one the staff avoid when they can, the one whispered about in break rooms, the one that seems heavier than all the others. On our post-surgical unit, Room 14 was that place. I used to roll my eyes when the older nurses warned me about it. "Don't linger in there," they'd say. "Finish your rounds and get out fast." I thought it was just hospital superstition. After all, when you work in a place filled with sickness and death, of course ghosts are going to find their way into the stories. But that was before I started hearing the whispers myself, and before I saw the patient's eyes widen in terror as they described a woman standing at the foot of their bed. That night I was assigned to the East Wing, which meant Room 14 was mine. My patient was an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery. Sweet, soft-spoken, the kind of patient you want more of on a night shift. But the moment I stepped into her room, I felt it. The air was wrong. Colder, heavier, like walking underwater. My arms broke out in goosebumps, even though the thermostat read a comfortable 72. The woman was sitting upright in bed, her eyes darting nervously toward the doorway. "Is she gone?" she asked in a trembling voice. My stomach tightened. "Who's gone?" "The other nurse, the one with the funny clothes." I forced a smile. "There's no one else here, ma'am. It's just me tonight." She shook her head. No, she was standing right there. She pointed toward the door, her finger shaking. She just left, didn't say a word, just stood there and stared. My blood ran cold. I wanted to brush it off, reassure her it was just a dream, maybe medication side effects. But I couldn't forget what my coworker had told me, or what I had seen myself through the glass of the break room door. I changed the subject, fluffed her pillows, and adjusted her IV. But the whole time, I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I finally stepped out into the hallway, I exhaled shakily, relieved to be out of the room. But then I saw her. At the far end of the hall, the woman in pinstripe scrubs. Her silhouette was faint, just barely visible under the flickering fluorescent lights. Her nurse's cap tilted slightly to one side, her posture unnaturally stiff. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just stared. I froze. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. The hallway stretched impossibly long, the silence pressing down like a weight. And then she turned. Not toward me, not away. She turned her head, slowly, toward Room 14, and vanished. My breath caught. My body moved before my brain could stop it. I bolted down the hall, my shoes squeaking against the linoleum. When I reached the end, I turned left, scanning every doorway, every shadow. Nothing. She was gone. The only open door was Room 9. I pushed it open, my chest tight, and found all 3 patients inside, awake and wide-eyed. It was nearly 3 a.m. They should have been asleep. "It's freezing in here," one of them whispered. "Can you get me a blanket?" I nodded, stepping closer. And then she flinched. "Oh my goodness, I didn't see you there." My throat went dry. "Who were you talking to?" "The other nurse," she said simply. "The one who was just here. Where did she go?" My legs wobbled. My skin crawled. Before I could answer, I felt a presence behind me. Heavy, cold, like a shadow pressing against my back. I spun around, hard in my throat. Nothing. Just the darkened hallway. But I swear, I saw something wisp away into the shadows, like smoke dissolving into air. I grabbed the blanket, tucked in the patient, and hurried out. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely jot down my notes. Back at the nurse's station, I didn't say a word. Didn't tell anyone what I'd seen, what the patient had said, because if I admitted it out loud, then it was real. But deep down, I knew. Room 14 wasn't empty. None of those rooms were. And whatever that woman was, she wasn't finished with us. Not by a long shot.